All right, good afternoon, everyone, and just call the Tuesday, October 7th, 2025 Regional District Board meeting to order. And as we always do, we begin with an acknowledgement that we're doing our business today on the traditional unceded territories of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And can read one of the calls to action, commemoration. And this is a call to action that's actually being put into place. We call upon the federal government in collaboration with Aboriginal peoples to establish as a statutory holiday a national day for truth and reconciliation to honor survivors, their families and communities, and ensure the public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. And certainly exactly a week ago today was Truth and Reconciliation Day, and it was heartening to see so many people out on the street acknowledging that. All right, moving into the meeting, we have a recommendation for a closed meeting. Okay, anyone opposed to that? And that carries. Adoption of minutes from September 16th. Thank you. Anything to note on any omissions or errors on those minutes? Seeing none, that carries. And next will be business arising. That's delegation follow-up from the Beaufort Watershed Stewards. Now just passes to our CAO, James Warren.
Thank you, Chair. As is board practice at board meetings where delegations are presented, the board will typically consider the actions at a follow-up board meeting. That is the case here with the Beaufort Watershed Stewards who presented 3 weeks ago at the board's September 16th meeting. There is a recommendation that we put forward here that would have the board write to the Minister of Forests around the status of the Private Managed Forest Lands Act, reiterating the shortcomings of the current legislation and in ensuring the safety and reliability of drinking water in the region, and also suggesting that the Beaufort Watershed Stewards be encouraged to engage with Comox First Nation on their research and findings. The CVRD has undertaken several submissions to the province on the PMFLA review process. So we could support such a letter to the minister with some of that background information. But Mr. Chair, this is the recommendation that we're putting forward to the board here today as follow-up to the delegation.
All right, so the recommendation is there, and I see a couple of lights. I'll go first to Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair. As you know, Cumberland had a meeting with the Minister of Forests as well. That was attended by CVRD staff and Comox Nation representation. And we were told that the PMFLA Act will not be changing. And so I wonder if we might want to change that wording to something like, we are disappointed to hear that the act will not be changing and look forward to solutions or suggestions on how we will move forward to protect drinking water, whatever the rest of the resolution is.
Are you putting that forward as an amendment?
Sure.
Okay.
It didn't.
Okay, so we're okay. Would you like to move it as you've just phrased it then?
Absolutely. Do you remember what I said?
You can pull back the tape. Lisa, did you get just there's definitely disappointment. That's the key part that I caught. Okay, we're moved and seconded at this point. We'll at least take a minute to get that together. I'm going to go to Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. Before we move to the motion, I agree with Dr. Brown that this is, in light of the meeting Cumberland had, it is somewhat of a, especially because the letter is going to the exact same person they met with. So it does need some serious adjustment. I think as a different follow-up, because what Cumberland heard in that meeting is that, which is something that's always happened the last 20 years, is just go and talk to the forest company. So I would like to see us take a totally different action, and that we write not to Mosaic, but to the owner of the company, and present them with the history around the review process. So that would be the BC Pension Fund and the BCCIC, who are owned in whole Mosaic, and for them to understand how both their company and the province are irresponsive to all communities on Vancouver Island, including First Nation communities and all regional districts. So that could be another alternate course coming from the Beaufort presentation.
And Director Brown, if you want to speak to it.
Yeah, so the Village of Cumberland actually has quite a good working relationship with the landowner, Mosaic. And so I would not want to jeopardize that. And one of the conversations I was able to have at UBCM was with the Minister for Emergency Management, Minister Green, and suggested maybe a follow-up meeting between Waterlands Resources, Emergency Management, and Forestry, so that those three ministers could hear our concerns. And so that was part of the follow-up that the Village of Cumberland is doing, but we would be happy to do that jointly with the CVRD if that's amenable to the board. So she suggested that we write to her asking for a meeting with those three ministers and share the cumulative impact reports with her at that time.
Okay, we don't need to make that part of this motion, but just something that we can make sure that the CVRD, would Cumberland be the lead applicant asking for the meeting and CVRD supporting, just to clarify?
I'm happy to do it either with Cumberland or CVRD.
Okay, well, we can just.
Our watersheds are connected.
Yeah, exactly.
So
We share a watershed. Okay, we'll take that offline and move on that. And this, Director Brown, does this reflect the wording that you suggested earlier? Reiterate the shortcomings. I feel like there was disappointment in there as well. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say write to the Minister of Forests to share our disappointment with the news that the PMFLA is not being updated, contrary to what we have heard previously, and contrary to all of, this might get long, sorry, contrary to all the input that local governments have put into that review, and request an update.
Provided.
On how the minister will be protecting drinking water in private managed forest lands. Something like that.
And the piece you dictated, the end of that would be the end of the clause, so the remainder could be removed.
Yeah.
And Lisa, it's just PMFLA, but thanks. And period after in private. Yeah. Well, not the end part of that though. I think that remains. As they say about editing on the fly, but we're doing a great job, Vin. Yeah, controls that. Sorry. Oops. Sure. Yeah, that's undo. There we go. Yeah, just that and perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is the resolution as moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that? Okay, anyone opposed? And that carries. And so did someone, I think it was Director Grief who seconded it, but I could be wrong about that. Oh, was it? Okay, but there was a seconder and okay, thank you, Director Wells. There we go.
Sorry, Chair, and just it just dawns on me, is this something that affects the whole valley, whether or not there's any use for at least CCing this to the other governments or having concurrence from the other councils from Courtney and Comox?
In the nation.
And Comox First Nation. Thank you for that. And I think that's implicit. I don't think we need to change anything. I just wanted
Yeah.
to put that out
I
there.
think staff are good. We don't require further wording changes, but excellent suggestion. All right. Any further comments, questions? All right. And Director Hardy, good to see you online. So anyone opposed to the resolution as it stands? All right, and that carries. Thanks very much. It's a good collaborative effort. And we will move on to reports. And the first one is the Visitor Center Business Planning Scope Report. I'll pass that over to CA Warren.
Thanks very much. Lisa Kilpatrick is our Community Development and Resilience Manager, and Lisa will be introducing this report and will provide support to the discussion. Lisa.
Good evening, through the chair to the directors. So today we're here to talk to you about a business planning scope for the visitor center along with requested budget. So since we acquired the visitor center, we have been having discussions in camera around the future of the visitor center. And one of the directions that we received through the service review was to explore ways that the visitor center could be used to the maximum benefit of the community, but also to generate revenue to decrease the cost of the service on participants. So as we move forward, we are proposing that we do a high-level business plan. We take a look at the variety of areas where we may possibly generate revenue into the service. So the scope of the business plan would include sort of traditional pieces of revenue around what are the market opportunities for, at least for that building, looking at whether there is space requirements for CVRD and our CVRD branches, and if the visitor center can support that need at all. We'd like to complete a cost benefit analysis of the acquisition of the adjacent property to the north of the facility, which is the visitor center parking lot. Right now, we don't own that parking lot. That parking lot is an easement on the adjacent property. We'd also like to look at identifying options for the property that to the south of the area, which we just completed a land use assessment on. What we understood from the land use assessment is from a development purpose that there are limitations to that property, but perhaps we could look at other ways that we can use and protect that property. We'd like to take a look at the revenue models of other visitor centers in the province and with a focus on innovative partnerships. And then as we move through these, we'd like to make sure that we are aligning the CVRD drivers, that we're paying attention to the value of the service, for value for the tourism service, meaning revenue back into the service, and then value for the taxpayer, meaning maximizing use of that facility and reducing the cost to the taxpayer. There are a couple of key, or I guess 4 key assumptions that we would like to move forward with as we build out this business plan. One is that the disposition of public property is not a desired option. 2 is that the tourism service will continue to use a small portion of this facility for operations. It is an active facility right now and does provide a key point of contact for visitors as well as community members. There is a current agreement with 19 Wing to have that jet display, and that is a key partnership that we'd like to continue. And then we would also like to ensure that the plan would not preclude future partnership with Comox. We are actually partnering right now with the IHOS Gallery, and there is we're in the process of setting up a satellite gallery at the visitor center for the IHOS Gallery. So as we move forward, we would like to have a budget of $20,000 for this work. It was not included in this year's budget for this service, so we would be proposing to draw that budget from the future expenditure reserve. So I'll just stop there for any questions.
All right, I see a couple lights going on. We'll go first to Alternate Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's good to see this coming forward, to see, you know, the highest and best use of this facility. As the report sort of mentions, it's been kind of ongoing for quite a few years now. What I'm not too sure is the completion of the business case, how long do you think that would take?
So ideally, we would be bringing it forward with options for the board to consider in the early new year.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. And go to Director Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. When we say high-level business plan, I guess, and $20,000, not a small amount of money considering that, one of the purposes of the report is around revenue generating. I guess I'm curious if we expect that with a high-level plan that we will come out with enough detail to kind of enact any recommendations, or is it going to be too broad to be able to do that? I just want to make sure we, get what we need for that work being done.
Oh, sorry, you wanted me to?
Yeah, I'm just curious
Yes.
if you feel that a high level plan is going to result in some really specific recommendations, because high level often indicates a very broad stroke.
So I think the reason why we're looking at a high level is because we recognize, just in the scope here, that there's a variety of directions that we could go here. So at this point, we aren't being directed to determine sort of what is the highest revenue and bring you the business plan that is going to have all the direct way that we can actually enact that one selection being the highest revenue option. I think it's important to bring the different pieces to the board, so the board can select which direction it wants to go in. So I think from the options for the board to look at will be detailed enough in a sense of what the revenue capability can be, so that the board can make those decisions. We're not looking at creating a business here. We're not looking at, creating a corporation where we actually will then be implementing a business plan to drive the revenue. The options here are pretty simple options in terms of being able to move forward. It's really looking at space as opposed to what we can do to create a business that will then generate revenue.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And Director McCollum.
Yeah, I guess my first question around this is if we're approaching it from a business point of view, in that, we want to see that operating this building has some value. Why is the starting point that we wouldn't consider like deposition of the property just as a comparative, like this is what it's costing to, like, I can't remember what the terminology is, but kind of like the cost of the opportunity, like that we're holding on to it and that there's a cost to that as well, that it's worth something. So it seems to me that starting from a place that we wouldn't consider what the opportunity cost of holding on to the visitor center is kind of missing part of the analysis. So I'm just wondering why. And also, I think there has been discussions in the past around whether or not it is strategic to hold on to this, and if it still has, a necessary value given how services and visitors services have changed. So I just wanted to understand why we wouldn't include that as part of it.
If I can, and then Lisa, by all means, jump in. I think there's a couple of thoughts come to mind there. Acquiring property for public sector is an important strategy that we look to from time to time. And so when we have property, we don't look to dispose of it, because once you've disposed of it, it's possibly gone forever. So hanging on to that property is important, and we've identified it as an assumption here. But if the board directs otherwise, that's certainly something we can factor in. As well, the facility itself is used for parts of the tourism service. The contractor is making use of that space, and it is used by the traveling public, by residents in our valley, and there's other uses there. So So we didn't want to make a presumption that those would be taken off. And I guess if the space is no longer available, then we would still have to find somewhere for that the tourism service to be able to operate out of. There is a fixed location need for some tourism service activities. So Lisa, if you want to add any more to the thoughts around including this assumption in the report.
So I agree with James. I think that it's up to the board if they want to provide that direction. I think if we do go in that direction, the last property assessment was completed in 2021 by CVEDS. I think we would probably need to go down that road again as part of the sort of discovery here, and so we would need an additional budget to cover the cost of that assessment.
Yeah, I just think for decision-making purposes, it's useful to have that comparative point, like what we're talking about in terms of a resource. And I'm not advocating for us to take that approach and look to dispose of it. It seems interesting to me that we would do a business case where we're not looking at an either or, we're only looking at one direction. But maybe I'm alone in my, my point of view on that. The other question I have around this is that, we've been talking about this asset for now 5 years. As I think this really came up during COVID. And what the value is of having the visitors center operate as a physical structure out there. And in this decision piece, we're looking at what the value is for the service, but are we going to do a comparison of the other way that service could be delivered? I know a lot of communities have moved away from this type of model. So I'm just in this kind of high level analysis, like how are we going to look at what different approaches for the visitor center service specifically could look like in looking at what the other opportunities are for that building. I mean, there's one of the examples is working with the arts community, and like if we were to look at that as a community amenity for something completely different, just how wide are we going to cast the net when we're considering what the highest and best use of this building is?
So I think for the use of the facility for visitor servicing, we do have a diversified model now. We have seen benefit to having that diversified model, absolutely. Just like any service, if we don't have that space, we will need storage space. We will need to consider where that servicing happens in the winter months. And so we wouldn't want to get into a place where we are coming out of that space and needing to rent other spaces. We have a lot more flexibility with that space. I think that there's definitely unique aspects of that building, that the exhibition space is a very unique space. And so there may be options where the full facility is not usable by other organizations. The footprint that we would require for the visitor information servicing up there is very small. And so it wouldn't impede on the broader use of the facility. We would make adjustments.
All right, thanks very much. And Director Wells, you've spoken already, so perhaps we'll go to, I think next be Director Arbor.
Thanks, Chair. I'll show a bit of support for Director McCollum in the sense that I think one of the drawbacks of having a regional district that's structured by services is that we look pretty much at everything in silo most of the time, especially when regards to the assets. And I've raised many times the need for, and I think Chair Kettler did that at the time, to talk about what is our property management and acquisition strategy as a corporation, and we're still lacking that. And it shows in a thing like this one because it is underutilized. So we all recognize that. Meanwhile, just before this meeting, I was in the director's room and I had to boot some staff because, the building's at capacity and everybody's looking for wherever closet they can to meet. And you know, and meanwhile, we have this facility that's just sitting there. And as Dr. McCollum says, what are the alternative uses? Like we could actually make a move as a board to turn that into office space because we know we're going to have some growth there. In my area, I've had the Royston House that's been sitting empty since the days of the improvement district. So that would be 2014. So it's a perfectly good little house. We had a few APC meetings, but then staff found it too inconvenient to go there. So now there's basically zero use of that house and it's just sitting there. So on the one hand, we have these assets that are at overcapacity, and then we have these ones that are totally sitting at, half of their potential. So yes, I just want to show some support for Dr. McCollum. It's fine. I'm not going to oppose this motion to look at this, but I think we're still lacking as a corporation that kind of broader picture around our property asset management, around what's underutilized, what's not, and how can we move things around so it's more in equilibrium. Thanks.
I can just weigh in on 2 points there. One, broad corporate-wide property acquisition strategy or property development strategy. I think it is something that had been thought about, if not in this term strategic planning, the previous term strategic planning. There was some discussion, consideration of having that kind of an approach, and it would be a substantive body of work. It wasn't something that was undertaken or supported at the time through strategic planning, but it could very well be something that I would suggest, not this particular term, but soon into the next term, it may be something that the board wants to undertake. It would not be a small body of work. We know that recreation is active in that space already, but there's a greater need across all the services. A couple of the bullets in the staff report do speak to the need of other CBRD branches and whether or not there could be some compatibility there. And I just wanted to mention the Royston office. Yes, to some APC meetings. There was also a satellite office built there for the previous iteration of the South Sewer extension project, and they were there for a couple of years, I think it was. But to your point, it's been sitting empty for some time.
All right, and go to Director Grieve and then back to Director Wells. Thanks for your patience, Director Wells.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You've heard me gripe for the last 5 years about this stalemate of just having a building sitting there when it could be at least breaking even. You have to realize that this building is basically a gift in some regards. I mean, if you wanted to build a public building today, it would be tremendous. So you don't want to really be giving up public buildings. I think repurposing them to get this information is going to be very valuable. Only in government would you allow this to languish so long without bringing any income in when it's sitting right there. So for heaven's sakes, let's get the business case and see if there is some way we can utilize it. It doesn't need to be one thing or another. It can be a lot of different things. I mean, it's I often say when we have a strategic planning session, it'd be nice to be somewhere besides this room or whatever. You have a really nice space there. I think we can utilize it. And meanwhile, as I say, public buildings don't come cheap. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Director Grieve. Then we'll go to Director Wells.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, I'll maybe just reiterate, the length of time is definitely a challenge. I do remember utilizing that space. Actually, I think, although not purposely, what led to the demise of the previous organization that was running it. But I think getting a good handle on what those holding costs are, the operations and maintenance costs, so that we know what those sunk costs are today and what we expect them to be going forward with replacing roofs and all the other things that has to happen with these types of with buildings, so that we can actually have that information while we're looking at what the best use is. Again, it's a very unique building. And then on the financial side, it might also be good to know like how, and again, I'm coming in as an alternate, so a bit of a blind spot for me to say the least, but how the funding is, I think maybe some of the MRTT might be going to it with 4VI. But I do recall, again, going back 4 or 5 years, and I don't even think they were called 4VI at that point, but that group of people were talking about this being a legacy type of building back then. And so, again, looking for whatever opportunities, not just to move forward, but so that they can provide the service as best as possible as well. Because they talked about pop-ups and those kinds of things. So I'd love to see if there's potentially some ways to make them be able to do those things and not be kind of almost seems like they're held by this location.
All right, thanks, Alternate Director Wells. Maybe before I go back to Director McCollum, I had similar questions when I reviewed the report. The sort of the first two assumptions that the disposition of public property is not a desired option, and that the tourist service will continue to use a small portion of the facility for operations. I'm not sure I see those as ironclad assumptions. I try to think of it perhaps in reverse. If we did not own this building, would we make efforts to go out of our way to purchase it? And I'm not so sure we would. And if that's the case, then I think we do have to question whether we desire to hang on to it as that is a fixed fact when we enter this analysis. I'm not sure the options that are in front of us need to be necessarily need to be altered, or perhaps staff can tell us varied. But I have to say of the assumptions, the fourth assumption, the plan will not preclude Comox partnership, is something that I can see as an assumption, but the remaining ones, I'm less clear that those are starting points that we have to begin with. But anyway, perhaps there's more discussion to be had, but I do hear some echoing of that around the room. Director McCollum?
Yeah, just kind of a related question is, like currently, aside from the small need for basically offices for the visitor services, how much is the visitor center getting used right now?
So in terms of numbers of people that are coming in daily to the visitor center, or just generally
Outside of the visitor
So-
center services?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a visitor center service, and then there is that exhibition. It's actually space, and it's actually quite surprising how many people come in to still look at that exhibition space. Not only visitors, but community members and school groups, and so that's something that always surprises me when I'm up there. So right now, we do offer that space for rental to community organizations. That was a decision that was made by the board a few years ago. There hasn't been any significant uptake on that offering. We do get more requests from private entities to rent the space, but that is outside of the allowable use that we currently have. And then the boardroom is available for CBRD staff and CBRD business. And so different departments take advantage of that space up there. But that would be it in terms of it's not maximized by any means.
I don't recall exactly what our rationale was when we brought in the policy around community groups only. But I mean, I'm not sure how long this process is going to take, if we're imagining that we'll reach a decision point on this sooner or later. But I mean, is there a good reason why we don't extend that rental use to other groups? Maybe you can refresh my memory, because I
Sure.
actually don't remember.
So at the time, the rationale was that we didn't want to be seen as being in a competition with private, like the hotels and the other providers of business use space. And so that's really what it was. It was not wanting to be in competition there. So that is something that I'd have to look to James and Jake in terms of bringing forward that bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that needs some revisiting. I mean, to have a space like this that's being underutilized for the sake of avoiding any kind of, I mean, our rec centers compete with private businesses too when it comes to using the gym, but that doesn't prevent us from providing the service. So Yeah, I would want us to, I guess it really depends on the timeline, because I mean, revisiting it and trying to put this out to the community only to change the use again in 3 months also doesn't make sense, but if this is going to be a decision that lands on the next board, and meanwhile, we have a whole nother year of kind of not really using this to its maximum capacity, then maybe we should revisit that and look to push that out to the public, because I know from, you know, moving about in the community that there's actually a real need for more meeting space to be available. So the fact that we have it and we're not putting it out to people that may want to use it, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Thanks.
All right, well, it's been some good discussion. We're still on receipt. Perhaps at this point we'll dispense with receipt. I'm not sure if anyone cares to move a motion. Anyone opposed to receipt? And that carries. Okay, recommendations now on the table. Any further comment at this point? And I guess maybe I'd check in with our CAO. Like, I'm wondering if this sort of the general tenor of conversation here in terms of uses for the visitor centers will be incorporated into the implementation of the recommendation, or whether if people wish other factors to be considered, what guidance might be needed.
I think the only sort of question mark in my mind is that if the recommendation is supported, the assumptions are noted in the report, and those are the assumptions that we would be going on in terms of initiating the business planning process. So if the board is not interested in the assumption that disposition of the property is not a desired option, we'd want to have that instruction here today. Similarly, the second assumption there that you mentioned, the tourism service will continue to use a small portion of the facility for operations. I don't think it would fundamentally change the business scope, but it would be good to know if those assumptions are less rigid from the board's perspective. And then I would also, just commenting on the last discussion about the current policy that we have in place, we can certainly take that away, and if that's an adjustment given timing of this process, if that's an adjustment we need to bring back to the board to adjust that policy, we can do that. So
okay, thanks, yeah. I'll go to
Director Hardy's online too.
Director Hardy, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So again, just trying to understand what's going to be undertaken with the $20,000 to develop business cases with regards to opportunities. Is if again, just trying to understand what's being requested for and what the work's going to be undertaken. And I've said it probably 100 different times. I think if we had a Starbucks or Tim Hortons in and around that area, like there'd be a lot of attention, there'd be a lot of revenue generated, and it would attract more tourism to that facility, which is something that we're kind of wanting to do there as well. So I'm just wondering, like I said, with regards to spending 20 grand to develop a high level business case for business opportunities, what kind of business opportunities are we looking at here? Like, is everything on the table? Thanks.
The chair, sorry, through the chair to the directors, we are not making any assumptions of opportunities that are not on the table. Part of the business plan will be looking at what is possible there, given the zoning, and the property is in Cumberland, as well as just the flow of traffic and things like that. So I think that it's not possible to say today that we're precluding any specific options there. That will be part of the business planning process.
Did you want to follow up, Director Hardy?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Of course, yeah.
I'm just wondering if we would be better off putting out RFPs for partnerships out in that area, like spend the 20 grand on advertising for RFPs. If that's something that we've considered or looked at.
Thanks for that question. In 2022, we were directed by the board to issue an expression of interest for interested parties that may wish to partner on that space. The board chose to conclude that expression of interest as we'd had communication to.
Yeah, I think certainly expression of interest is one approach to be able to identify some potential partnerships or tenants or development on that property. The business plan as described here, the high-level business plan, is another approach to be able to identify some future uses and opportunities. I think staff are suggesting that this approach will provide some examples and some opportunities. It may be that the results of that do result in need for an expressions of interest or something to go to market to find some tenant. But I think the positive of this kind of approach is that it provides a range of opportunities for the board to then consider. I don't know that we'd be able to undertake an expression of interest process that would be refined enough at this time, given that a business case or a business plan would be able to provide that range of options for the board then to consider.
All right, thanks. And Director Hardy, you're welcome to come back for another question. I'm just going to go to, at this point, Director Morin.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just, excuse me, wondering really if there's any harm in disregarding those assumptions. Those assumptions could still come up to the surface as priority, but maybe it's limiting having those assumptions in there. So I'm suggesting that maybe we get rid of those because the result may be that the options presented may include those, but I think it might be a bit of a barrier in the process to have them. So other than the last one, which I think is still important, the precluding Comox First Nation partnership.
So it's on the floor. Did you want to propose an amendment?
The recommendation doesn't specifically mention these assumptions, but our CAO did say that the work would be based on this report. So where's the recommendation? There it is. So, I guess I would just say initiating the business planning process without excluding the assumptions made in the staff report, or excluding consideration of the assumptions or something to that effect.
Do you mean the first two assumptions or four altogether?
The first three.
The first three
I believe
assumptions
would be,
I want to keep the chat. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's, thank you for putting that out. So that's now an amendment. That's an amendment. So we'll need a seconder there if someone cares to second that. Okay. Seconded by Director McCollum. We'll go to a bit of, did you want to speak on that any further, Director Morin?
I guess the other question I had, which is not necessarily explicit in the report, is the parking lot. We don't own that. And I guess I'm wondering if that is also an assumption that parking lot would be not included in the potential plans, like purchasing the parking lot for, some kind of opportunity. So is the parking lot on the table in terms of the consideration?
Part of the scope says to include or to complete a cost benefit analysis of acquisition of the adjacent property to the north.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So it's been moved and seconded. So we're on to further discussion. Alternate Director Wells.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I appreciate those assumptions basically becoming optional assumptions or being somewhat disregarded to the same effect as the partnership with Comox First Nation. I guess, the idea of being able to do expressions of interest to a certain degree would also see if there's things that aren't being contemplated. But given that we have this motion on the floor, I guess for me, the big thing is the timeline. We're sort of 4 or 5 years from when this started to where we are now. If a report's going to be coming back, and I think I heard, in the new year some point. So a decision point might be maybe not even in this term, or maybe at the very end of this term. Is that kind of the idea for?
I think the intent is to come back with the results early in the new year. then progressing from there.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right, it's been a good discussion. So we do have a motion on the table, and Lisa, I don't know if you, thank you again, appreciating your ability to help us on the fly. Okay, so I guess first we'll be voting on the amendment, and then when that's completed, then on the main motion. If I'm getting everything correct at this point. So on the amendment, anyone opposed to the amendment? That carries, and the motion as amended. Anyone opposed? And that also carries. All right, thanks everyone. And we'll keep moving through the agenda, and the next item would be the 2025 approved grants budget amendment. I'll pass that to our CAO, Warren. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair. Kelly Broughton is our Manager of Financial Planning, and Kelly will be introducing this report. We'll support the discussion. Kelly.
Thank you. Through the CAO to the Chair. Staff are here to request that the 2025 to 29 financial plan be amended by $807,480 to include the grant revenue and corresponding expenditures awarded to the CVRD. Under Section 374 of the Local Government Act, a regional district must adopt a balanced 5-year financial plan by March 31st of each year. That plan details the planned expenditures and the sources of all revenues. On March 18th of this year, the 2025 to 2030 financial plan was adopted through bylaw number 864. Sorry, that should have been 2025 to 2029 financial plan. The legislation also specifies that a local government cannot expend funds that are not contained within the financial plan. To allow for new opportunities and changing conditions, the adopted financial plan may be amended during the year by board resolution. Between the 2025 financial plan adoption and August 15th, the CBRD has received 6 grants through various funding streams for emergency management and fire protection programs, as well as one for the electrification of the heating system at the water treatment plant and the investigation of solar panels to bank excess power. The grant revenue and planned expenditure allocations have been detailed in the staff report dated September 22nd. These grants will now need to be formally incorporated into the financial plan through this amendment. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks very much. Looking around to see if there are any questions. I don't see any, so we can dispense with receipt. Anyone opposed? That carries, and there's a recommendation. Sleepy crowd today? Okay, great. No one wants to watch the Blue Jays game, clearly. Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Anyone opposed? And that carries. The next is strategic initiatives update report, and I'll pass that over to our CAO.
Thanks, Chair. So this report is presented 3-ish times per year and updates on the strategic initiatives the board has set through your strategic planning process. In addition to what's contained in the report and the mini Gantt charts that are presented, I've got a couple of follow-up items just to share, draw some attention to. From time to time, the milestones that are described here, we do want to make some changes just because they as projects evolve, we understand that the milestones may change, or we would propose a different approach. So I would note that regionalizing the Comox Valley Emergency Service is one that we will take a look at to better accurately reflect the work that service is going through with our partners, the changes to the legislation around Emergency Disaster Management Act, EDMA, and the upcoming regulations. So we'll see some changes on that in the next iteration of this report. Under the Finance and Administration Core Service, the strategic planning item, I can report to the board for those who were not in attendance at the UBCM awards night. We were nominated for an award, and a few of us attended that event, and then a whole lot of other local governments attended the event. I think everybody who submitted an application was there, and it was quite a crowd. Yeah, we weren't successful. We didn't win the award, but we certainly got a little bit of recognition for being there, and thank you to the board for supporting that. Still under finance and administration, the foundational fiscal framework and strategy work that our financial services is working away on. And I believe at the next board meeting, there will be a staff report presenting the asset management plan that the regional district is undertaking. It is building from the board policy around asset management. So there will be some background information presented shortly on that. The advisory group on reconciliation, still under finance administration, will be the subject of one of two subjects at the October 16th elected officials forum. And so we'll have Nick Chowdhury, who is our facilitator, working with the advisory table, presenting, as well as some attendees of the advisory table supporting his work. Still under finance and administration, successful conclusion or happy conclusion to the Comox Valley Ground Search and Rescue Facility search. They over the summer announced the purchase of the Moray facility that they have been operating out of. So, and the board's contribution to that certainly made that successful. Under the Recreation Core Service, the initiative that is developing playing fields and allocation framework and amenity improvements collaboratively. That's another one that we'd like to take a look at the milestones and review the sequence of work there. And so you'll likely see some changes to the milestones as that project comes forward. Of course, that's something that comes to the Recreation Commission for further dialogue. Under the Regional Sustainability Core Service, the creation of the CVRD Housing Organization, that will be the other subject that's at your October 16th elected officials forum. And the consultants who are supporting us on that work will be presenting background information and some of the key findings that they've received from discussing the Housing Corporation with nonprofit community, developers, and local government partners. So that'll be informative around the Housing Corporation. Just about to the end. And that is the end. Those are the updates I wanted to share from the Strategic Initiatives report. So if you have any questions, certainly we can entertain those.
All right. Any questions at all? Seeing none, that's just for receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? And that carries. The next is the UBCM convention meetings follow-up. And I was thinking perhaps, CAO, if you wanted to speak to the staff meetings, I could speak, Director Hardy and I could speak to the elected meetings. Director Hardy, would you be interested in kicking off and talking about our meeting with Minister Parmar? Or if that would work?
I think I'm okay if you share, dear Chair. I thought the meeting with the minister went quite well. And I think he was interested in trying to work with the CVRD with regards to getting the site amendment permit and the heritage investigation permits allocated sooner than what staff had reported back to the CVRD on.
I think that's a perfect summary. I thought both meetings went extremely well, and I really appreciate the lead role you took in framing this when we're speaking with Minister Parmar. And there really were two possibilities. One was to fast track the existing process, and the other one was to consider that Comox's chip is a reasonable alternative to something mandated by the province. And he agreed to take both of those forward. And I know CA has already been in touch with the ADM to set up meetings. So I'm really, really encouraged by the tone of that conversation and the speed with which the follow-up is happening. So yeah, very successful meeting there. The second meeting was the Minister of State for Local Governments and Rural Communities, Minister Brittany Anderson. And each year at the Chair CAO Forum, it's our practice over the last 2 years to pick a single topic of advocacy. And this year it was funding for small water systems. And so we walked in, there were 3 chairs. There was myself, Mark Pendergraft from the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen, and Barbara Roden from Regional District of Thompson-Nicola. Representing the 27 chairs and the landmass of British Columbia. And certainly the minister noted the power of bringing together collective action and collective advocacy, and said that in her role, she's sort of stationed within the Premier's office, that she has the ability to then work with other ministries on, from that. And she'd been given the go-ahead by the Premier, given the sort of extent of interest and concern over this, and would be working with colleagues in housing and municipal affairs, health, water, and land and resource stewardship. So it's a tough hill to climb, but she was committed, and this was a step forward in terms of working between those ministries. So all in all, as meetings at UBCM goes, it felt like there were sort of substantive steps forward on both of those elected official meetings. And maybe I'll pass it over now to James just to talk about the staff-to-staff meetings.
Sure, thanks. And I'll actually pass the microphone over to Christiane Weil, our Senior Manager of Strategic Initiatives, to provide updates on the staff portion and the convention.
Thank you, Chair. So in addition to those minister meetings, we had 3 staff meetings as well. Some topics that we brought forward included Heritage Conservation Act and our request that any of the new amendments respect Indigenous laws and processes, including the Comox First Nation chip, and as well as sustained funding for emergency management programs to implement EDMA and respect Indigenous engagement requirements. I can share as well that staff and directors also attended conference education sessions about proposed changes to the Heritage Conservation Act and affordable housing initiatives in other BC communities. And we also heard clearly about the need for fiscal restraint in a presentation from the Minister of Finance, and that was reflected in messaging at subsequent staff meetings as well. So I think while we need to continue to be realistic in terms of the financial climate, we did hear several positive messages through our minister meetings and from EMCR staff as well, who want to work with us on sharing good news stories about how we're utilizing grant funding and collaborating with our partners to help bolster the case for Treasury Board to continue funding for these programs. So with that summary, I'm pleased to take any questions you have about this report.
All right, Director Morin, go ahead.
I wasn't able to attend UBCM this year, so I just wanted to say I'm really appreciative to staff for presenting such a detailed report on these meetings. It's really helpful when you're not able to attend to get a better sense of things. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I'd say the exact same thing. I appreciated both the preparation that went on in advance. We were well briefed and well prepared, and just this very concise rundown on what occurred at all the meetings. So many thanks to Christiane and James for that support. And so just for receipt, anyone opposed to receipt? And that carries. So next we're on to minutes, and this is the ESC from September 16th. Any errors or omissions? Anyone opposed? Carries. The Rec Commission from September 16th. Okay, moved and seconded. And any errors or omissions? Anyone opposed? And that carries. Next item number 7, Director Grieve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a little background on this one. As you probably know, that the electoral areas lack a lot of the tools to regulate short-term rentals, including things like business licenses. So we rely on temporary use permits. This was an application for a TUP to allow short-term rentals in Royston area. We received 12 letters of comments from the neighbors, and a very large contingent of the neighbors showed up in the gallery in opposition. Although this was supported by staff, there was a lot of apprehension and anxiety. So I'm proposing a small change in the recommendation in consideration of the high level of concern, and given that the staff are working on a new policy around short-term rentals in the electoral areas. I believe that, in fairness to all, the best compromise would be to limit the TUP to 1 year. This would allow perhaps an opportunity for the community to allay the fears of some of the people in the community, while allowing the owner a chance to operate the short-term rental. And in a year's time, he could apply for an extension of the TUP, or if at this point, the CVRD comes up with a new process, which should be within a year, because that puts us in October next. So rather than going for a 3-year on this thing, I think it's only fair to the community that we limit it to 1 year, which gives everybody a chance to get used to TUPs, or to beg your pardon, short-term rentals, and perhaps they're not as scary as you think. So if I could get a seconder for this. Anybody can second it.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate Dr. Greaves' thinking on this. This was a 2-to-1 vote yesterday, and I was not in favor of proceeding with the TUP, and it is an Area A. So I do appreciate the thought, even though I would still have gone with the denial. I think I will support for sure bringing it to 1 year, because it'll allow the opportunity to see if it's working for the neighbors. It's not ideal for me, but I appreciate your effort to try to strike a compromise on this. Thank you.
Is that a long-winded way of seconding it? Oh, sorry, didn't see that. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to be light, but yes. All right, so we've been moved and seconded. Appreciate the comments by directors. It's voted the areas only. Anyone opposed? All right, and that carries. Thanks, everyone. And we're now going to move into our restricted in camera. So we'll just take a minute to secure the room.